Committee meeting this evening. To begin tonight's meeting, I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting takes place on Wurundjeri land, and they are the ongoing and traditional custodians of the land in which we meet, and pay my respects to elders both past and present. Item 1 is membership. Membership is listed on the agenda, as listed on the agenda, with the exception of Councillor Lawrence, who is on an approved leave of absence and is also an apology for this evening. Item 3, disclosures of conflicts of interest. Are there any disclosures?
Yes, I have a conflict in relation to the second item on 396 Bell Street.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any other disclosures? No? Thank you. Item 4, confirmation of the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 11th of December 2017. That's moved by Councillor Messina and seconded by Councillor Greco. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Moving now to item 5, consideration of reports. 5.1, planning permit application at 69 to 72 South Pleasant, Northcote. Officers. Mr. Rudd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This application relates to 69 to 72 South Pleasant, Northcote. The application seeks approval for a total of 7 dwellings. These comprise of 3 two-storey forms. There are 4 that are 2-storey, 3 that are 4-storey. Also goes the same with bedroom composition. So what the application is proposing is 3, or another way of putting it is 3 additional dwellings across the 4 lots. So 4 existing dwellings there, that will change to 7. There'll be a composition of 3 and 4 stories, and the 3-storey component being returned to the site and the edges transitioning down to the lower scale. Each of the dwellings will have access to a single garage and there's a 10 car space behind each of those, so 2 car spaces each. There's therefore a waiver of a single visitor space. The application is located within a general residential zone and combined with the council's housing strategy contemplates its level of change for consent. One of the other characteristics of the site is 1,479 square metres. It's also located at Genova opposite the railway station. So one of the things that housing change framework within the strategic statement talks about the opportunity for redevelopment to occur close to public transport. So it's one of the strategic benefits of the application is promoted. Notice the application has been provided. There have been 15 objections that have been received. Points of objection are summarised in response on pages 10 to 14 of the officer's report. You note, Madam Mayor, that one of the objections is around scale and questions about the character of this development and is it an appropriate fit for the particular area. One of the challenges with that view is that the dealing with the zone, which is statewide, that allows the resource and look and dig a little bit further. You will find that where you have locational attributes, that level of height can be supported. One of the things that's very important in the application is this transition to the single story room. It's certainly one of the big changes that's occurred in the early versions of the plan and was before the committee now. I think the report provides a good discussion and overall character on the scale and question of why 3 stories can be considered in this application. The officer's report recommends that subject to a number of minor changes in Condition 1. A lot of those deal with the ESD and to ensure there is safe compliance with street setback over the side setbacks. The application can be supported with a notice of decision.
Thank you. I'll now call on Sam D'Amico to address the committee on behalf of the applicant. Thank you. You'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you, councillors. As already put to you, in terms of the physical context of the site, it's located on the northwest corner of South Pleasant Westfield Street. The site's just shy of 15 both to the west and north of the site as well. So when I talk about the design rationale, I'll explain the transition down to those particular sites. On the opposite corner to the east of the site, we have a double-storey dwelling that's built hard edge to the Westwood Street frontage. So there's no actual setback to Westwood Street. It's a sheer two-storey wall, just to give some context. In terms of history of the site and the proposal, our client's a local Northcote resident, born and bred, still lives in the city of Darabin. They sought advice and the initial set of plans from CHT, which is a very well-known award-winning architect, and submitted plans for 8 three-storey townhouses on the site. Following quite a detailed request for further information and issues and meetings with council officers, our client's gone away, sought a new architect and a new design rationale, as it was quite clear that the original application didn't meet council's vision for the site or the surrounding area, and he's gone away to do the right thing and try and develop a set of plans that did more respect the existing neighbourhood character of not only the site but the surrounds as well. It's what I would call a collaborative approach with the council, where the client has gone away and actually listened to the concerns of the council officers and responded accordingly, and hence the officers' recommendation to support the application tonight. In terms of the application, it's 7 dwellings on a large corner site. As already put to you, it's less than 1 additional dwelling per allotment, given that there are 4 sites on the site at the moment. It's a 2 to 3 storey scale. What you find in the design is that it's been purposely designed to have 2 stories located to the west and north of the site to transition down and place the 3-storey form towards the corner, where there is more robust built form with the 2-storey form located hard up against the boundary on the opposite side of Westwood Street, and the railway reserve located to the south, south present. And that's been a purpose and deliberate design response to transition down. In terms of the energy rating of the building, it was something that we were quite conscious of right from the inception. The dwellings achieve an average of 6.5-star energy rating, and that's achieved through solar hot water service, using recycled brickwork throughout the development, cross ventilation for all the dwellings. There's obviously energy efficiencies gained from having shared boundary walls within the development as well. The development proposes a low site coverage of 49%. As you'd be well aware, ResCOPE would allow a site coverage of up to 60%. And in terms of garden area, given the overall size of the site provides 39% of garden area being retained, which will allow quite a significant level of landscaping to be introduced throughout the development. It's been designed to minimise impact on the adjoining properties. There's no additional overshadowing at the equinox by virtue of the setbacks that have been proposed. And one of the features of the design and the design response is to place a substantial portion of the secluded private open space of the development in that northwest corner of the site, where it would abut the secluded private open space areas of those adjoining properties as well, ensuring the built form doesn't traverse deep into the sites and into those neighbouring backyards. In terms of overlooking, council officers have placed a condition to try and address that, and we're not contesting that here tonight. Crossovers are only 4 crossovers proposed as part of this.
20 seconds.
As I've mentioned already, the client's a local developer, born and raised, currently still living in Darabin, and sought to provide a high-quality development for their local area. He's taken the time and money to listen to the council and responded accordingly, and we respectfully request that the council supports the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You may return to your seat in the gallery. We have 2 objectors that are registered to speak this evening to this application. So I'll call on Tom Ney to come forward first. You will each have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to address the committee. Okay.
Hi, I'm the neighbouring
Thank you. I'll now call on Cameron Hodgkinson. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Cameron and I live at 68 South Road with my wife Emma. We share the western boundary with the proposed development and we submitted a comprehensive written objection to the proposed plan, highlighting our concern with the size and the many miscalculations and inaccuracies in the submission. Generally, we are not opposed to the sensitive development of this site and we support an application that complements the area and our modest single-storey Edwardian home. Unfortunately, the proposal is uncharacteristic in size, even when compared to other local developments. As Thomas pointed out, the unified design of the 5 dwellings that front South read as a single large mass reminiscent of the commercial buildings found on High Street and Victoria Street. More personally, the scale and proximity of dwelling 1 to our home is of major concern. The front setback of dwelling 1 and subsequent dwellings on South Crescent does not meet the Res Code standard. Dwelling 1 is currently set back by 4.56 metres, but according to the standard, this should match the setback of our property, which is actually 6.5 metres. This is a full 2 metre shortfall and must be increased to meet the standard. The western wall of dwelling 1 is built to our boundary with a height of 3.15 metres, blocking views in daylight to 2 large habitable windows, including our master bedroom. Furthermore, the second floor of dwelling 1 is located only 1 metre back and reaches a height of 5.8 metres, while the addition of screening to the rooftop terrace to address overlooking concerns increases this height even further. As our home is only set back 1 metre from the boundary, this will create a huge and overpowering structure that diminishes the usability of these windows and spaces. This does not align to the neighbourhood character guidelines, which states that new developments should maintain or reinforce the existing living or spacing between dwellings. Currently there is no spacing between these dwellings and we would like an appropriate boundary setback applied with an opportunity to review the revised plans before approval. The proposed front fence between dwelling 1 and our property reduces our current fence height from 2 metres to less than 1 metre, diminishing the privacy of our front garden and increasing visual access to the interior of our front bedroom. I would like the front fence retained, and if this cannot be done, a like-for-like replacement implemented.
That's time. Many thanks for your submission. Thanks. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Amin.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I was wondering if we could get some further information about some of the issues raised by the objectors, one at a time, or give the 4. One was around the planting of environmental weeds. One was a query about the setback from the neighbouring property on the South Crescent side. The third about the blocking of light habitable windows, and the 4th about the reduction size in the fence.
Mr. Rudd. Sorry, you're trying to write them down. We'll let you know if you don't cover all the questions.
I think the report's quite comprehensive. There's certainly a section on page 18 that deals with the street setbacks and explains why there's a variation there. And you'll notice there's the residents have picked up, there's a number of provisions that are put in place. One of them does require change in setback from the side down the street, and there is an explanation provided about the variation in setbacks along South Crescent. And the assessment was generally in accordance with the standard. The placement of environmental weeds, there is a condition there also requiring the approval of a landscape plan. So there hasn't been an endorsement of plan specifically yet. I know from other assessments there certainly is a concerted effort to make sure weed species are the plan schedule that's approved. So through our landscape team, we're quite forthcoming in terms of making sure that plant species are appropriate and non-weed species. So if that is the concern, that certainly will be picked up in the approved plans. It is problematic having a stage between the plans coming in and another notification process. The planning environment is high.
Thank you. Just, I guess, there's a question from the gallery at the moment. Unfortunately, there's not an opportunity to ask any more questions or make any more comments at this point.
Well, just a clarification on some of the inclusions in the planning recommendation that responded to one of those questions.
You wanted clarification on the officers?
No, I have a clarification.
No, I'm sorry, we can't do that at this point, I'm afraid.
No, we're always happy afterwards, so if there's a view of firm views or feelings we're certainly want to ensure
Yep.
our report to you for consideration is accurate. So if anything is separate to the decision, we'll certainly try to be honest about it.
Mhm.
But equally too, more than willing to explain the reason and the rationale for our report and our recommendation to any residents.
Okay. There was just one other question that Councillor Amir asked about the front fence.
The report is silent on that. That is something that we could discuss with the applicant. So certainly if a fence is considered to be contributory to an area, it's something that we're happy to sort of take up as a conversation point to see if that could be retained. But certainly in the committee's hands, you can ask for that to be investigated through an petition to Commission 1 or ask for try to get sympathetic fence treatment because it is fair point that fence treatment is contributing to the street state.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Just a minor question, an indication, if I can, of where we are in the 60 days.
Madam Mayor, just inside, so if there's a contemplation of delaying the decision, we're then in the arena of being over 60 days.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Melissa. Mine's just about the first objective talked about car parking, and I know that in the report we've got that the peak visitor demand occurs at weekday evening and weekends, which complements rather than coincides with the peak demand associated with the railway station. I was just wondering, do you think that's acceptable in this situation in light of what the first objective said, that it's quite busy there?
Sorry, could you?
Yeah, so the question is, when the first objector talked about car parking, can you just clarify that you think it's going to be okay with the reduction in visitor parking?
I think one of the important points with this is we look at the location of managers. We refer to the application of our internal transport planning management team. They look at car parking and they look at provide peer review of the reports committee. So as you said, in the following one we discussed tonight, we've got an anomalies analysis. So if there are anomalies in there, we believe there are concerns about empirical data and conclusions. Data sources are what we're talking about is WACA at one visitor car space. We're looking at what capacity is on the street, proximity to site for the railway station. And the fact that there's no development on the side of the road, there are a number of considerations that look forward in general conclusion that supporting the board from the applicant endorsed by transport planning.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Rennie.
If I could just seek further clarification in relation to the setbacks on the western side of dwelling 1, where the required setback would be 1.66 metres, but the proposed setback is 1.02 metres. I know there are a number of conditions. I just wanted quite specifically in relation to that one to understand whether the conditions would address that particular setback and bring it into line with the 1.66 required.
There were councillor referring to page 20 of the report, so that's source 55.4, which looks at B17 compliance. Planning permit conditions that are suggested request in all instances compliance with the standard B17. I'll refer to, so that would be the dwelling setback for dwelling 1, B17 compliant.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Would anyone like to move a motion? Councillor Rennie.
I'll move an amended motion, which is that the officer's recommendation be supported subject to the modification of condition 1A and 1R, in addition to a new condition 1A to require the removal of a roof terrace proposed for condition 1 as follows. Condition 1A and R is modified to remove any reference to dwelling 1 roof terrace, and a new condition 1A is added to read the rooftop terrace of dwelling 1 deleted.
Is there a seconder for that motion?
Before
Councillor
we
McCarthy.
hear a seconder, I just wanted to check the issue about front fence, which Mr Rudd had mentioned. We don't have words for that unless there are.
We've got some proposed words from the CEO if you'd like to insert them.
If I could see.
Do you want me to read them out?
If we
Okay.
could, yeah, that may determine what I do.
An extra condition, I'm not sure where it would go, but the retention of the current front fence or details of a new front fence for both frontages, which is respectful of the streetscape character of the area. And that would become condition 1A, bracket 1.
And I'm happy to include that in the motion that I'm placing.
Okay. So the motion is amended with the rooftop terrace deleted and the front fence condition inserted as well. Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. This has been quite a difficult one, I suppose, because I understand that within the neighbourhood this is not a popular development, and in fact people are concerned. I think a couple of the things that influenced me to feeling as though we have little choice, and our option, I think, is actually to look at how we can reduce the amenity on the neighbourhood and increase the visual acceptance of the proposal, I suppose. Partly, I believe there is no doubt that if this were to go to VCAT, it will be approved by VCAT. And VCAT may be much less likely than us to place a condition that would see the deletion of the rooftop terrace on the westernmost dwelling, which abuts 68 South Crescent. I think that by putting in these additional conditions, we're actually offering the very best opportunity to decrease some of the amenity impacts by getting rid of the rooftop terrace on the most western side, which will reduce noise, visual impact and potential overlooking impacts that might occur. The reality is that these are 4 blocks, and these 4 blocks could be developed separately, and a developer could put a McMansion on all of them without a planning permit. And those buildings that could potentially be placed on each of these 4 blocks without a planning permit, if they were single dwellings, could be just as great in scale and size as what's being proposed, and they could all look completely different from each other, and they could be ugly as anything, and we'd have absolutely no say in the matter because it would be a building permit matter, not a planning permit matter. The planning permit is required because 4 blocks are being divided in such a way as to create 7 dwellings. We've seen a lot of developments where a block is actually divided to create 3 or 4 dwellings. In this case, these blocks aren't enormous, but if they were 1 or 2 bedroom dwellings, we actually could be seeing a development that proposed 8 or 9 or 10. These are actually going to be quite good quality homes. They're not going to be cheap homes by any stretch of the imagination. And they all actually deliver higher levels of garden area than what is required and a lower building footprint on the land than what would be permissible. And I think that when that building footprint on the land gets up towards 60%, which might be permissible, when the garden area requirement falls even lower, that's when we know that developers are really pushing it. I think that, in fact, these dwellings certainly will create change in the street, and I don't think we can say otherwise. But knowing that VCAT will support them, I think we would be naive and we would be unfair to our residents to send this to VCAT with the hope that it will be rejected when we know that it won't, And I think that the option that we've provided around deleting the rooftop terrace and improving the fence and the visuals of that are probably the best thing we can do, and will create a better outcome than rejecting it
Thank
tonight.
you. Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor McCarthy.
I'll just follow on from Councillor Rennie's comments and also thank the objectors and submitters for their presentations, because I think they're really, it just demonstrates the level of care and attention that our community has about what type of development does go in, and I think that the concerns raised are entirely valid. I was in two minds about this, and I think that Councillor Rennie's arguments are the right ones in terms of how we respond to this application. It is extremely difficult when you see a situation like this, and you know the trajectory that we'll be on, and you know what little value VCAT places, which is where this would usually end up, and it may still end up there, what little value VCAT places in neighbourhood character, and the strength of neighbourhood character on its own as not being an argument. So our best efforts in this particular situation is not to try to play a game around saying we'll say no to it here and hope that we get a better outcome at VCAT, but I think in this case to condition it as much as we can into submission. And in fact, the officers, and I should make the point, the officers' conditions that have been proposed are considerable. That was one of the first alarm bells that rang for me, was actually that there are a lot of conditions in relation to this application. And one of the challenges when you look at something like this is the plans that you're looking at aren't actually what the conditions will result in, which makes it difficult. I was of a mind to want to defer this, to have those plans redrawn in accordance with the conditions. However, we don't have that time, because we then risk a failure of decision, and then it could certainly end up at VCAT. So I'm comfortable with the proposal that Councillor Rennie's put forward, and I'm pleased that we've got those additional conditions put in there about the deletion of the terraces and the inclusion of the fence. I think the important thing for residents and objectors at this stage is to stay highly engaged in this application and engage as much as possible with our officers to influence what the presentation actually is, because that's where the best outcome is going to be achieved.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Any further speakers? Councillor Gregor? Yep.
Yeah. I'll be speaking against the suggested alternate motion, because I think this particular application turns on the issue of neighbourhood character. I think that's the central issue associated with this particular application. I note that in the application, the applicant has tried to ameliorate the issue of visual bulk and the issue of how this development sits on a particular site by some design features and also some materials that are being used. And that to me is sort of recognition that there is an issue about neighbourhood character and visual bulk that's associated with this particular development. I acknowledge that it's the number of blocks that are associated and that are being consolidated, but if you look at the overall square meterage, it's about 1,400 square metres, where we're trying to cram in 7 dwellings in 1,400 square metres, notwithstanding that they are at the moment quite a number of separate blocks. So I believe that the development that's being proposed here is not consistent with the neighbourhood character, and I feel that the council should reject this application, because I think there will be a strong argument at VCAT in relation to upholding that position in regards to not meeting the requirements of neighbourhood character. And the final point that I would make is that we're noting with a lot of our residents that the nature of the city is changing, and I think we have to acknowledge that the nature of the city is changing, because we have to embrace a larger population. But I think that the offset to that is that people want to see good design, respectful design that actually incorporates the character of the area in which a proposed development is being considered. So on that basis, I can't sort of support it, even though I'm sympathetic to the attention.
Thank you, Councillor Gregory. That's time.
By the developer.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour and against? That motion is carried. The Planning Committee has decided to grant this planning permit. This decision can be appealed to VCAT. Objectors have 21 days in which to lodge an appeal with VCAT, and the applicant has 60 days. A notice detailing the decision tonight and how an appeal can be lodged will be sent to all objectors and the applicant in the next week. Moving now on to item 5.2, which is an application for a planning permit at 396 to 402 Bell Street and 1 to 7 Arthur Street, Preston.
Yes, I have a conflict of interest in relation to this matter. It's an indirect conflict, being a conflicting duty. My role at the VLGA requires me to work with community members on such applications.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. We'll wait for you to vacate the chamber before we proceed. Mr. Allen.
This application proposes a stay of refurbishment and extensions to the Darabin Carousel in Bell Street and Arthur Street, Preston. Full details of what the application proposes, it's quite detailed, is provided on page 32 to 34 of the officer's report. The application also includes the addition of 15 gaming machines. This will increase the amount of EGMs or gaming machines at the venue from 65 to 80. The application also proposes to extend the trading hours. Currently, the weekdays are not, there's an early close
Thank you, Mr. Rudd. I have no speakers registered this evening, but I understand there may be someone in the audience who is an objector that would like to speak. Sam? No? You're right? Okay, all right. Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions? No? Would anyone like to move a motion? Councillor Messina, you happy to move the recommendation?
Yes.
And seconded by...
I'd like to second it if I may, and with Councillor Messina's indulgence, just add some words provided by our officer, Mr. Rudd, to point 3, which I'll read out. And this is on advice from our lawyers as well. So
Yep.
the additional words would be to point 3, to follow the existing point 3, and they would be: the site also provides impacts beyond this area due to the fact that the site is also close to the Bell Street railway station and is highly accessible to increase foot traffic, exposing the venue to vulnerable communities beyond the 2.5 kilometre radius.
So this would be at the end of the current
At the end
point
of
3?
point 3.
Yep. Councillor Messina, are you happy to incorporate that into the
I'm
motion?
happy.
Thank you. So that's seconded by Councillor McCarthy with that change. Councillor Messina, would you like to speak?
Yes. I would like to move the officer's recommendation for refusal based on the following. This application is not congruent with the draft Darebin electronic gaming machine policy tabled here this evening, 2018 to 2022. I'm driven by statistical data, percentages, ratios. When we have little variance, we can sway one way or the other and be creative. Statistical data tabled this evening doesn't speak volumes, it shouts from our pages. Please allow me to draw your attention to statistical data that have been tabled here tonight that highlights that $18 million is lost in our municipality each year to electronic gaming machines. As indicated, what's more alarming is it is half of the council's annual budget. I draw your attention to page 14 that highlights 82% of the electronic gaming machines are in the Preston and Reservoir area. That equates to $70 million worth of losses in the north of our municipality. More importantly, statistical data tabled this evening indicates that the highest concentration of electronic gaming machine losses in the Darebin are in the vicinity of the Darebin RSL. I draw your attention to and read out the following. Venue name, Kramer's Hotel, 79 electronic gaming machines, $10 million worth of losses. Croxton Park Hotel, 54 electronic gaming machines, $5 million worth of losses. Darebin RSL, 65 electronic gaming machines, $4.4 million worth of losses. Junction Hotel, 46 electronic gaming machines, $5.8 million worth of losses. Olympic Hotel, 80 electronic gaming machines, $10 million worth of losses. Preston Hotel, 40 gaming machines, $4.2 million losses. What's more alarming is that 5 out of those 6 establishments are in the Kazari ward. So my question is, more, sir? No, sir, we don't need any more.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Councillor McCarthy.
It's a bit hard to follow such a well-written and detailed statement, so I won't even try. I just would make the point, and I was alarmed not only to obviously hear again from Mr. Rudd that we've had a situation where the proper notice rules haven't been observed, but also alarmed that this application has even come to us when the policy settings of this council, the signals we've been making for some time are pretty clear, and EGMs are not a way to underwrite a business model. Whether it's succeeding or failing is irrelevant. This is an addition of 15 machines to the 65 that already have approval, and the reality here is that we have made this case publicly time and time again, so it is surprising that we have this application here. But purely on technical grounds, there are plenty of reasons why there is a great big X against this, and councillors would see from the grounds of refusal there why we have a strong case in terms of the planning application, and to oppose this. I'm not so confident with the Gaming Commission and their consideration. I just want to make a point in relation to the additional words, and I think this is important in terms of how we quantify social impact, and I appreciate Mr. Rudd's assistance with this. When we have a venue which is so well located to public transport, it makes the place a hotspot for problem gamblers who will choose to go there because they have an addiction, but also because it is damn easy to get there. And that is a serious problem with this application, apart from all the other reasons that have been outlined. So the social impact is significant because of the transport corridors that surround the site as it is. The other thing that's worth noting is that in terms of the hours of operation, we have that same situation that was conveyed earlier. We are basically,
Sorry, you're at time.
under these sorts of proposals, just making it possible for people to gamble throughout the night, and that is not a healthy thing
Thank
for our
you,
city.
Councillor McCarthy. Sorry, I didn't give you a warning then.
It's fine.
Are there any further speakers? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion's carried. The Planning Committee has decided to refuse the planning permit. The applicant has 60 days to appeal this decision to VCAT. Notices detailing tonight's decision and how an appeal can be lodged will be sent to all objectors and the applicant over the next week. We'll just wait until Councillor Rennie joins us again before we move to the next item. Moving now to item 6, other business. 6.1, general planning information, scheduled VCAT applications. That's moved by Councillor Amir, seconded by Councillor McCarthy. All those in favour? Motion's carried. Item 7 is urgent business. Is there any urgent business? No urgent business. And that brings us to the close of the meeting. Thank you for those who joined us in the gallery this evening.